And we are officially live. I'm really excited about this. I think I want to kind of start off by saying, Keita, you and I have known each other for a very long time at this point. And it's exciting to see what you're doing, especially with this event tomorrow. Just about mental health in general and the screening of a movie, and the producer is here with us. But I wanted to thank you for including me in this, because there's a whole bunch of clinicians that you could have reached out to, but for some reason you thought about little old me, and I'm excited about that.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. We've been in these trenches together for a very long time. There could have been no one else to do this with me. And it's an honor and a privilege to have you on board. So I'm really excited to have you be a part of it.
Well, why are we here? Let's talk about the event tomorrow, and then kind of get into some conversation about why we're doing what we're doing. But will you tell us about the event?
Absolutely. Well, it came to be about because, of course, I'm a clinician, a professional counselor, but mental health has been a passion and a conviction of mine for years. Right here in the Valley, there's such a tremendous need for awareness. We have a lot of deficits concerning mental health. We have a lot of nuances in the hands of people in our community that don't have access to resources. So I thought that we combined awareness to the resource piece, and of course the film that we will be showing, and I'll let Mike talk a little bit more about that. It just seemed suitable to bring that to the heart of Las Vegas, right in our backyards.
Well, you know Michael, but we don't as a community. So why don't you introduce him?
Well, where do I even begin? William Michael Barbee. He is the entrepreneur, the philanthropist, the author. He's so many things to so many genres in our communities. But today he is the film director of the film Beyond the Silence. It's the film that we'll be showing on tomorrow. I'll let him give you more background about the film. Consequently, he is also a clinician, a professional counselor. And so he's very well versed. He's an expert on the matter as well. And I'll let him give you more information about that.
Now, do you go by William or Michael?
I go by whatever you want to call me, brother. Family friends call me Michael. Professionally, the tag is William Michael Barbee. So I'm with family here.
Okay, so Michael, it is. I think, Michael, before we even talk about the movie, I want to throw this out there as we segue into talking about the movie. There's something that I've noticed in being a pastor. There's some lessons that you learn, leading people and watching people, as you know. And one of the things that really stands out to me, and I know that mental health is not specific to men or to Black men or even Black people, but one of the things that has stood out to me the most is that right now, people, but Black men, are struggling with mental health, and they're struggling to identify what it is. They're struggling to talk about it because they don't identify it. And so they're walking around functioning all day, every day, without being able to pinpoint what's going on in their mental health. So with that, and the movie that you've produced, what led you there to producing? What had you seen in society or experienced where this type of movie was important?
Well, first, let me just say thank you, Brother Antone, for having me as a guest on your podcast, along with Keita Williams. The movie in and of itself is just a opening gateway to the discussion on mental health within the community. The impetus behind me writing, directing, and producing the movie was because I was a former consumer of mental health services. Turned advocate, turned executive, where for the last 18 years I own Airmate Counseling Services. And I sit on the board of directors for the Mental Health Association. So it's a full circle thing for me. And so me bringing the film to the forefront is based on me telling a narrative that impact many people within our communities. Just so happen I'm focused on the African American community and how the individual, the family, the judicial system address mental illness in society. And so that was the impetus, because I was a former consumer turned advocate.
Keita, why was it important to you to do this?
Well, I think that, mental health issues impact every family, every person, whether you are directly impacted by it or whether you know someone who is impacted by it. Oftentimes, the individual who is challenged with mental health issues is the focus and still at a disadvantage. But oftentimes, the family members who are left to care for them or advocate for them are kind of thrown by the wayside and really not taken care of. And so this was an opportunity to be able to address all the concerns from the person who is directly impacted to the one who is caring for that person. We want to really break down the barriers that exist. Still, while we have made tremendous progress, we know that here in the Valley, this is not necessarily a mental health town where we have advocates and policies and agencies that really address those issues. It's more of a social workers town. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to really be able to bring mental health awareness to the forefront, and not just for a season. This is just the beginning. There'll be more discussions and there'll be more advocating on the front lines of public office and policy so that we can really get the resources into the hands of everybody that needs it.
I work at Mojave High School in the school system doing direct practice with teenage students every day. And I think you're targeting something that's extremely important, because I think we're still looking for the answer to dealing with the stigma of mental health and needing help for it. At the school, we'll deal with families, and the families, and a lot of times it's Hispanic and Black families, mm-hmm. are telling their kids, these are free mental health services that they can get through the school district. No, we don't believe in that as a family. That's not what we do. And so I don't want you a part of counseling or social work. And a lot of times they really don't want their business out there. Back in the day, there was a thing where it was like, how did they used to say? You guys are older than me, so you would know this. Don't put our dirty laundry in the street, like that kind of thing.
Well, right? You just did.
But I think you're tackling something, and I heard Michael say earlier, if I believe I heard him correctly, that initially I was a recipient of services, and I was too. Just kind of needed some help and some guidance, balancing some of my chemicals and dealing with some stuff that I was going through. I think we're missing transparency. Is what I think is going on. And so that's why I think conversations like this and this movie is extremely important, because I'm not sure we still know how to. It's trendy to talk about this, but I don't know if we know how to really talk about it.
Well, let me interject here, because if we look at the church that we grew up in during a time when the 60s, 70s, well, maybe we are older than you. And so there were stigmas even within the church. And what the church is guilty of is praying everything rather than having the proper services needed to provide for people who may be going through a mental health crisis and or dilemma. And so what ends up happening, the issue is never addressed. And when you do it from a clinical perspective, you'll go back to the family of origin, and you'll go back to the root of some of these issues and how people show up in their behavior versus anyone having a diagnosed mental health condition. And so I think the church has been guilty of it as well, creating stigmas, maintaining stigmas. And you are 100% right when you said that today it's become a fad. Everyone's talking about it. but are we really addressing it?
Mm-hmm.
And so it takes platforms, and that's why I take my hat off to you in this hour, as well as Keita, for bringing this awareness to the forefront. It's so easy even for me to produce a movie that speaks to the hardships of what we go through, that speaks to crime, speaks to all of this other sensationalized stuff, and get so much credit for that kind of movie. But what we do, we perpetuate the issue rather than address it. And so we rather see on the screen the drug dealing, but we're not looking at the impact of why it's okay in the mindset of some of these people to sell drugs in the first place, and the impact it's having in the community. And so until we actually get to the core of things, we'll continue just mix this pot, and it'll never come out baked.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point that both of you make. Transparency is key. I celebrate the two of you for simply being able to say that you've had some personal, experiences with your own mental health. Like I said, it lands on every single person, every single household. The other part of that, though, is that when you have individuals who culturally come from a background where it is not customary to talk about in their homes, in our culture, Black men are typically not going to talk about their mental challenges. It's taboo in a lot of cultures across the board, and so it's going to require transparency. Someone has to break the silence. Someone has to break the silence. Hence, beyond the silence, someone has to begin to say, "I too have challenges with depression or anxiety," and the list goes on. I don't like to refer to it as mental health issues or a mental health disorder. I often in my office refer to it as mental wealth. I'm like, well, what does your mental wealth account look like? Are you in a deficit, or do you have something in your savings, for a rainy day? When you put it that way to individuals, they begin to explore the possibilities on a personal level of reflection and say, okay, well, yeah, checks and balances. Where am I in my wellness? And then the other part of that is breaking down the stigma. People feel like they go to see a clinician or a therapist simply when they're sick. But it is really something to be proactive, like check in when you're well and you want to stay well. And this is how you do it: transparency, talking about it, awareness, pulling back the curtain on the things that are troublesome to people. This is a very difficult time in the world for a lot of people. And I think it's a great time because it's something about pain that when you have reached a level that is unbearable, you really don't care about hiding it. You don't care about being behind the curtain. And so we have an obligation to be on the front line for those individuals when they are ready. We are ready to receive them.
Can I interject before you come in, Pastor?
Absolutely.
One of the things that I think is missing from most conversations is the historic PTSD that descendants of the enslaved African have been living with, and we've normalized our trauma, and it shows up in many ways. And often we're not living, we're functioning. We have yet to live and explore because we haven't been in that area. One of the interesting things, and I'll pivot on what I'm doing more so as a clinician to address this issue, is I remember I was in grad school, and one of the projects you have to do is record your individual session as well as group. And when it came to group, I was doing my internship at this large organization. And I didn't want to deal with cases where people were diagnosed with a psychotic disorder or whatever. I told him, I said, I want to deal with people who look like you and I, who may be a father, who may be a son, maybe a pastor, doctor, maybe an engineer or a contractor who is just stressing and bottling that stress. And I want to deal with men. And one of the things that I did was I created my own village based on the men I knew. I invited 13 2 years ago. And now we're at 140 of Black from 16 to 78 who come every 2 weeks, at least constituency of 2025 come every 2 weeks to the platform to have the discussions. And one of the things that we work on for the past 2 years is emotional intelligence and really breaking that down. Because part of what we've been denied as men is boys don't cry. We fall, we hit the ground, get the same scrape. And so we bottle that, but yet we die earlier than our sisters. And so when we haven't given ourselves permission to emote, we start functioning in a way where we're bottling all of this stuff in. And so if you think about emotional intelligence, the book talks about 4 stages. I always add my own. I have 6 stages. And the first thing I say, you have to make sure that you're emotionally available and present. Because how often do men walk away when they're upset? I ain't going to talk about it. I'm just going to walk away. So my position is to encourage brothers to stay in the fold and stay with that emotion, stay present, because you can't fix something if you're away. So let's be present for the moment. So the first stage for me is staying emotionally present, knowing your emotions, knowing your triggers. 4th is offering empathy. And then 5 and 6 is broken down into conflict resolution, which is conflict resolution within yourself and the conflict that you want to resolve in the environment. And so through those 6 stages, these brothers like you and I have been coming to these group sessions every 2 weeks, working on their emotional intelligence. Why? Because it builds their self-awareness. And so in order for us to address past trauma, am I talking too much?
No way.
In order for us to address past traumas, let's look at where we are so that we can see what healthy living or opportunities of healthy living look like, feel like, so that we can experience that. Then maybe we can start unraveling. I remember, and I'll shut up after this, I became a consumer of mental health services at the age of 20. With suicidal ideations and all of these things that led me into the hospital. And I didn't think my healing would come through or the direction, put me in a place of help, would come from a Jewish woman, 4'11", chain smoker with an afro. I didn't think she would help me, a man from the inner cities of Newark, New Jersey, with anything, because I knew nothing about counseling. But in order for me to move on, go to college, I needed to show that I was in treatment and all these other things. But I know historically we have issues that we have yet to address. And until we start addressing those, we continue to put Band-Aids on them. We continue to show up broken. And we function in a world that we think we're doing our best, but we don't know that we're not even putting out a half of our potential because of our brokenness.
It's 2 things that I want to address with what you said. One of them, which one do I want to go to first? Let me go back so that I don't forget. And then let me stay here and then we'll go back. Just remind me to go back to what you said about the church and the way that we've handled mental health. I think we definitely have to talk about that because the church is such a it's such a center for what we do as Black folk. But the question that I have for you is what happens when this group of men that you bring together, they do the work, they get these breakthroughs, they understand how to emote, as you say, they're comfortable in emotion, but they go back into society where a Black man who understands how to communicate properly and understands his emotions and what he's feeling is not necessarily accepted in the society or by social construction that we've created. I've heard women say, I don't want to deal with an emotional man. And so what happens when this man is doing all of this work? He goes back to his wife. She don't want to see that stuff. Go to his job. They don't want to see that stuff. Because I believe, I hate to say it this way, but I believe that by social construction, Black men have been put in a box that they need to stay in. Be a provider, be a good father, which is being a provider. And I don't even know if it goes further than that.
Well, just as you say social construction, I have to say social deconstruction.
Oh,
and so peeling back what has been constructed, the box that we're in. And so let me answer the question then. How do these men apply it even if society rejects it?
Yes.
When they come back, because that's more where you're headed. And so one of the things that is mandatory, our organization is called Man Village Men Support Group. One of the things that's mandatory is that the things we work on the inside, we apply it to the outside. I've been on the board of directors for 5 different organizations, of which 3 of them are large. And being on those boards, we're all doing, which is my mantra, leave more than you take, giving of ourselves to something greater, to a greater cause. Part of the Men in Man Village Support Group is to give back. So what do? We go to the Youth Detention Center, the youth house in New Jersey here. Well, there where I live, and we mentor those kids there. We go to the Youth Detention Center, we feed them on Thanksgiving. We go to the YMCA, which houses over 400 individuals and families. We pass out gifts on Christmas morning. These brothers get up Christmas morning at 5 o'clock and feed these people. And what that is doing, because I'm on the board of directors for Salvation Army, so I have them tolling and kettling for the Salvation Army. What that does for the mind of those men is they're executing the 4th stage of emotional intelligence called empathy. They're changing their perspective, how they see the world, and they're applying what they've worked on in society. And so what happens is their wives, the ones in our group, are the ones who actually call me to say, hey, my husband, I said, I can't tell your husband to come. You encourage him, but I'll receive him. And that man has made a 180.
Wow.
And so my question for the brothers, we just marched in the protests. This is how much we get involved. We just marched in the Dr. Martin Luther King March of Resistance. And I wanted them to go to that step because part of our responsibility is being community agents. And what are you doing in the community? So we're protesting against injustice. We're protesting against what's been happening in the political world. And so we're also saying that we are going to take lead, not only in our families, but in our communities, because now we're taking all that intelligence. So when they're yelling and cursing and saying all these things, you're not responding with your energy and your fists. You're allowing your emotional intelligence, real clear with your self-awareness. You've practiced already all these mindfulness activities, and now you're able to engage society however way it comes. So when it comes to the construct that doesn't accept us, we're deconstructing that in a way that society will respect us while we work on ourselves.
I think that's so good. I want to ask you this, or rather, I want you, if you could explain a little bit more about PTSD in our DNA. I was actually looking for this book that I read when I was in school, and I can't find it, but it argued what you're arguing, that that PTSD, anger, and rage was just in us because of what we've been through. I don't know the data or the research or what's evidence-based concerning that, but I'll tell you what I see every day. I see young Black men who are angry and they don't know why. Some of them they got stuff going on in the home. Some of them should be well adjusted, but they are absolutely angry. And so I think it's in those years, in these teenage years, where you're seeing that that rage in our DNA or that PTSD coming out of them, because we're asking, what are you so mad about? Why are you so angry? And they don't have an answer. They don't know, but they're just mad. But will you expound on that just a bit?
Well, the book you were probably looking for was my fourth book called Hear My Voice, Born Black in America.
Come
I
on,
wrote
come
that
on.
2 years ago.
Come on.
And what I believe as we talk about PTSD, I look at the traumas that our ancestors endured. I correlate that to the systems within this capitalistic country and how the system used force-free labor on human beings. How the system denied education all the way up to the 60s for us in many areas of this country, denied us the rights to this, redlined us. You have a sociologist, Dr. Joy DeGruy. She talks about post-traumatic slave syndrome.
Oh, wow.
And that really speaks to how we see ourselves as a result of what traumas we've been through. And so when you see the slithers of this trauma in our children who are confused, who are lost, who are angry, and don't know where the anger comes from, I say go back to the home and go back to the home of that other home. And you'll start getting your answers. And it all goes back to whether it's on a plantation. Imagine this. In 1400s in Africa, slavery wasn't new to just the experience of Africans, because you had the Islamic slave trade. What happened when the Europeans got involved? They were escaping Europe for religious persecution, to expand in the New World, and they needed some bodies, human bodies, to do the labor, do the work. Once the Europeans got a hold of it, it changed the dynamic. So even when we look at the continent of Africa, out of all of those countries in Africa, maybe a handful of them still speak their native language as the primary language. If you go in the continent of Africa, the majority of Africans speak a European language. That's real stuff. And so the way we've embraced Christianity, and so we talking about North America now, we got our skew with, when I was a kid, Jesus was blonde hair, even though the word never changed. Jesus was blind hair and blue eyes. And there was a conditioning that we had.
Yeah.
And so that same conditioning impacts the way that we see ourselves. We have expectations within our own community of one another. And sometimes we're challenged to openly celebrate each other. We're challenged to openly support each other. It's because of how we see ourselves. And like, if you're constantly pushing forward and still being pulled back, and you can't see what's pulling you back, you just know that you're not progressing, you're regressing.
Yeah.
You and I and Keita, we will have some anger here. But thank God that we've been able to peek around that corner to see that there's still hope, and that's called faith. Even when the hope wasn't there, in the midst of fear, we had something called courage to explore something different.
Come on and preach.
and that's where you find him. but that's where we really need to be. We really need to trace our origins, my man, and really go deep into that. I think about historic things and how the U.S. government put laws down, and they're reversing some of these laws that were enacted in '64, civil rights bills, and they're taking them away now. But when we look at the misconception of 40 acres in a mule and 40 acres in a mule, and how that only applied to the southern states, but the narrative that our children have, they owe us 40 acres in a mule. But that's a misconception to what was actually happening. That was just for those southern states along the Atlantic Ocean that went down to Florida. And the promise was by a field general who said, hey, we're going to free you, yes, and we're going to give you 40 acres and a mill. But that's afterwards you had Lincoln was assassinated. And all of that stuff was reversed that was given to the black folks. Imagine how you feel. You buy your house and somebody come back and take it.
Mm.
My grandfather fought in World War I. He was out of Brunswick County, Virginia. He was drafted to fight in World War I. When he came home from the war, he received money, had enough money to buy a farm. He bought 70 acres. His siblings, they bought acreage. We had a lot of land down there. My grandfather was drafted for a second war. And this is what they don't talk about, because they say, oh, you can never get drafted for 2 wars. Many blacks were drafted for both First and Second World War.
Yeah.
In addition, my uncle, my grandfather's oldest son, fought in the same World War II that he fought in. And you know, father and son not supposed to be in the same war. Neither do you supposed to be drafted for 2 wars. So now think about this. So my grandfather get these 70 acres that he bought. He's drafted with 10 children at home over time. 10 children. My mom's 9 brothers and sisters, a total of 10 of them. By the time he came home from the war, the white man in Brunswick County stole his land. My grandfather became a sharecropper on the land that he once owned. What kind of emotional trauma my grandfather's experiencing? What type of pain is he going through?
Yeah.
This is going back to the 40s. And so when that's not addressed, my mom had to see her father humiliated, sick and saddened. He died at 62 years old. But by the time he came north, he was a defeated man. A defeated man. But that's the story, not just of my family. It's your ancestors, Keita's ancestors. And so when we look at this, it's called intergenerational trauma.
Yeah.
When we look at it from that lens, we understand why some of us show up. I'm tired, man. I ain't doing it, man. I'm tired. Man, I don't believe in that. And that's why we get a lot of this resistance, because we have yet to address it. And then we throw out these things, and some of our advocates in the community exploit us and exploit our pain, and they look like us. They're of our skin, but not our kin. And so they make a living at this, perpetuating the trauma that we've dealt with, politicizing it just for the benefit of their own personal gain or their notoriety. But we have to address historic stuff in order to really rectify, or at least have some knowledge of it.
Well, there's a word I want to throw in there for either one of you to discuss.
What, Jesus?
We don't got to throw him in there. He's already there.
That's right.
Glory be to God. Hallelujah. Yeah. No, but either one of you can address this. But and it's going to sound like a silly question, possibly, when I say it. But I heard you say, if you really want to get to the root, look at that home and the home before that. And then you gave some historical content and context for all of that. When we talk about generational trauma or intergenerational trauma, and this is a genuine question for me, because I struggle with trying to understand this, because there are some white people that'll say, okay, get over it. This is a new day. There are some black people that'll say, get over it. This is a new day, because they don't understand it. My question is how real, because what I hear you talking about is pathology. How real is that?
It's as real can get, as real as you're looking at us right now, at each other. There is no such thing as get over it, because we are here and we're not going anywhere. You can't pretend or mask that the issues are not there. It's systemic, it's genetic, it's physical.
Nice. Yeah.
Spiritual. It's a thumbprint, it's an imprint. It's something that is forever and forever constant. And so in order for us to truly evolve And that's on both sides. That's in every culture. It doesn't matter if we are Black or if we're white. It requires an understanding. The problem is some don't want to understand, because if you understand it, that means you've identified it. And if you identify it, you got to do something about it. And so as long as we can have on blinders and ear muffles, then we can pretend that there really is no problem. To the persons that are most challenged, most impacted by the systemic scars is what comes to mind. When Mike spoke about going back to the 40s, that breakdown, it happened for men, Black men, but it impacted their wives and their daughters. When you say, Antone, women don't want an emotional man. Yes, they do. But we want him to be emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence is our end game. If we can just be emotionally intelligent, then we won't unravel and we won't come off the rails. And so in order to achieve that, we have to deal with what was. You gotta
address the difference. You have to address the difference in that, so that the listeners understand. And it's such a brilliant point. What is the difference in being emotional? And I think Michael spoke a bit on this a few minutes ago, in being emotional and being emotionally intelligent. What are the differences?
Well, from my perspective, to be emotional, I think people perceive as a weakness. They're like, oh my gosh, he's crying. He's angry. Anger doesn't become a bad thing until you displace it. You put it someplace where it doesn't belong. But if you have enough anger, you can change things. I'm angry about a lot of things, but I don't choose to sit back and just be angry. Punch walls. I'm an advocate.
So would you say self-awareness is really the big major difference between those two?
Yes.
Yeah.
To be aware.
Awareness.
You have to be aware.
It's
at the core.
Back? No,
you can go back. You can go back.
No, I love where we're going, but I don't want us to go off from where we just came from, because there are some things that make us different than others. The Holocaust occurred in Germany, but the Jews inside the United States will push this country and everywhere else where they are to remind you of the Holocaust. That was the worst tragedy that happened to mankind that was caught on film. Slavery wasn't on film. And when we look at it from that lens, we have to tell our stories. We have to demand that our stories are told so that we don't repeat history. And the reason why history repeats itself is because we're not telling. It's the same reason why down in Florida and other states, these red states, they're getting rid of African-American history because it's our story. And so to rewrite story or create a story or abolish a history of a people, that person, the next generation, is not going to know their history or where they come from. The other thing that as you were talking, that came to mind, and as I go back to what I was saying, we talk about intergenerational trauma. I push back even on us as people of color being the victims. I say that even the white children of those men who did the brutality, who hung those little boys and men, for a child to see that level of brutality, that child normalized it. And the way he acts it out or responds to it is different, because he's on a winning side when it comes in a capitalistic country. Because he has the finances, he has the award, he's having forced free labor, the benefits of it. but that trauma that he went through too, watching his father hang that man, cut that man up, burn that man. Any human being is going to go through that trauma. How they respond to it is totally different. So that's the white experience. The one the trauma was done to is another type of trauma. And for those who saw it. And so I think there are many traumas, and what we're watching traumatized people perform, whether it's white or black in America, in a capitalistic country.
I want to be honest about something. I'm listening to you talk, and what I'm realizing, well, I'm 45. I don't know how old you are, Michael.
95. I look good for my age.
How old are you?
95.
Oh, okay.
Nice. I look good. Black don't crack.
Great, brother. In talking to you about this, I feel removed from the education of it. I'm listening to your passion, and I'm listening to you talk about this with great knowledge and education. And I don't know if it's a generational thing, but what I'm realizing in this conversation is that the education has been removed a bit, where I don't know if I don't know if I could actually make the necessary changes in our culture that need to be changed, because my education, I don't have the education on this to produce the passion that you have. Am I making sense?
No, you're making sense, but I push back on that. Each of us have platforms. Each of us have experiences. I think what happens is being intentional about speaking to our expert levels of expertise, being willing to say, I don't know this. I'm going to go and find out about it.
Yeah.
I remember before I got into, before I became a clinician, now I had some real sound stuff, being a former consumer, being around it, owning a mental health clinic for years, being on the board of directors. So I had some knowledge, right? But I had to be willing to undo some of the stuff that I thought was right. Because after I've done the research, after I did the studying, I had to say, what I was always told was not accurate.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like when it comes to 3/5 of a man, let's deal with that.
Yeah.
We hear people say, oh, they said we were 3/5 of a man. Well, you got to understand taxation without representation. You got to understand everything that was going on there. Whether you get taxed for your plow, your horse, or whatever, or the human body. And what that was really about was the enslaved. They didn't want to count it because they would get more, the southern states would get more representatives inside of the House, and then they can control the vote. So instead of them having to count each person, they said, no, we'll count 5, but we'll count every 3 to represent the 5. So that's where the 3/5 come in. But when you hear us today talking about, they said we were 3/5 of men, it's like, come on, it's a history with that, but you have to want to explore that history to see what it was, because it's there. It hasn't changed. It's just like when the 13th Amendment talks about we abolish slavery, except for in the penal system. So slavery still occurs.
That's right.
But let me be more clear on what I was saying and what you're making.
Sorry for going left field, man. Forgive
me.
No.
No. That's not left field. We need this. When we think about critical race theory, what you're helping me to realize right now is why they want to remove Black education out of the school system. Because when you hear the way that you're talking is what's inspiring me. But if you remove the education of it, you remove the passion of it, and then we don't do anything. The generation behind me and my generation, we don't have this. This is why I'm fascinated by what you're saying. And it's really making me think like, I need to pick up more than a mental health book and a Bible. You know what I'm saying? Because you're inciting something in me like, yeah, you're right. But the problem is that the education has been removed, is the point that I'm trying to make.
But I appreciate that. But the education that I got as it pertained to us as a people didn't come from the school. It came from me watching so many blockages and barriers experiencing and hearing the narratives of my grandfather and my great-grandfather, knowing that my story is the same as somebody else's story who I never met, but they just happen to look like me in another part of the country. And so for me, and then doing research. So my last book, it was just a matter of doing the research and understanding, like we talk about privatized prisons. In America, we have more prisoners or in prison people than the whole world has combined, because there's money here. Privatization of prisons. And now we're not the majority that's in there, but ratio, and when we're looking at the ratio percentage of who we represent as 13% of the population, 80% of that is what's being reflected in there. And so when I see that all the time, I can't sit back and watch. And so my education is why. In the midst of everything I do, I say why.
Why? That's so good. So timely. Yeah.
We just can't. I get so flustered when so many of us wait for an opportunity for someone else to tell what to do. From your platform, do it. What you're doing now, you're doing it. What she's doing it. What I'm doing, we're doing it. But we have to encourage others. And part of that is going back to those levels of emotional intelligence. And so as Keita was saying about, and then actually both of you were into that dialogue, and I ain't want to go into that one because I'm pushed back on all of them. Saying that, well, we want a man who's emotionally intelligent versus one who's emotional. And so guess what? A man wants the same. You know, and so the narrative is that we the, Antone, you and I, we the big bad wolves. But there are other wolves.
She wolves. She wolves.
Yeah, she wolves. So we want it too, but the thing is, we see, for every one word we have, girls have 3 words. It's because we were not given the opportunity to say it was okay. We weren't told it was okay to express yourself. It was okay to put words to your emotions. Girls been doing that since forever, and that's why they could just tell you. So they are ahead of us in that emotional intelligence thing. I'll give you that, even though I push back on them.
I don't even know how much credit, though, I would take for that, or any woman with emotional intelligence would take for that, because even though we appear to be somewhat more advanced in our emotions, we fail to be present with our men. Whether it's your father, your brother, your uncles, your spouses, or just other men in the community and in your network. Hence why they say, I don't want an emotional man, because we have been tailored to, provide for ourselves emotionally, spiritually. The man is absent in so many ways in the household, in relationship, because technically speaking, he had to be.
But that's where the communication breaks down, because a man doesn't want an emotional woman who just screams, emotes, and just says how she feels.
It's exactly the truth.
Hey, Pastor, you're getting something else right here. Talking about mental health.
Let's talk about
talking about mental wellness. Mental wealth.
But it is true. It is true. And I think it is part of the healing process in community and in our families, is that the communication has to come back to some level of normality, whatever that really is. We can go all the way back to slave times to understand what that looked like. We are so far removed from what that looked like. And then we have the church that has told us it should look like this, a certain way. And so there's so many dynamics. We could talk about this for, this could be a series.
Well, I think I will ask Michael to address this based on what you're saying, Keita, and historically how the Black man was removed from the home and in some ways emasculated with buck breaking, I believe that they call it.
Yeah.
How has that the removal of the black man during slavery, do you think that that has anything to do with the structure of the family system today?
Of course it does. And not only then, there's a movie, and film has always had a way of telling a narrative, if we paid attention to it, of a problem that exists, particularly whenever given opportunities in our community. We watch movies like Claudine.
Mm-hmm.
And so Claudine, this single mother, James L. Jones wasn't he a garbage man? And they had a relationship, and they were a budding relationship, and they was falling in love, and he was taking on a family. But a man could not live in the house when the white social worker came by. Make sure he was out in order for her to get the welfare benefits.
Wow.
And so when we look at it beyond just slavery all the way up until present, these are real things just put in a theatrical setting so it'd be palatable. But we get caught into the actor and the acting, and what a cute story, but it's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we look at how the black man in many ways was taken out of the family, I mean, many, many more ways. We have to talk about vagrants laws, black codes. We have to talk about those things and see how those things, once 1865, 1867, with all that Reconstruction, those laws after the Emancipation Proclamation, when they tried to build these laws to say these things. So what they wanted to do was target black men still. So they have vagrants laws. If you didn't have a job, if you didn't have this, didn't have that, you could lock that person up for 30 days or more. And so taking him out the house is because he was unemployed. He was unemployed because there was no economic development in that area outside of slavery. And when you abolish slavery, it goes back to the black man being taken out of the family. He becomes a prisoner. So when we go back to, I believe it was the convict leasing system, 1848 or somewhere around that time, convict leasing system was really enacted more so when slavery was supposed to have been abolished. What they allowed was the landowners of the plantations in the South to hire for $1 or less and a convict, and that was a convict leasing system. They would pay the state of all these states in the South to have their prisoners. And so where did they find the prisoners? Vagrants laws and all these other things. So we've been taken out of the house long time, and it comes up till today. And then when we look at the economic structure, how can we feed our family if we're the last, if we're denied, if we have a record? And that's why expungement today is so important.
Yes.
Nonviolent offenses so important. Yes. This is, man, all of this stuff plays into what's happening today. And so watching history repeat itself and watching the black family, look at this. We're talking about immigration. Blacks are no longer the largest minority, Hispanics are. But yet, it's because of the sacrifices of African Americans during the civil rights movement that opened the door for immigration in large numbers, all white, black, every color you could think of. Look at today. Blacks are still fighting the fight for LGBTQ rights, still fighting the rights for immigrants. But yet and still, we look at how this thing impacts us. We're still fighting a fight and still falling back, but yet we're still making progress. Man, I could go on this. Man, listen, you got me started. You gotta stop me. Because listen, because I'm going to tell you about Biden.
And see, that's the thing is I'm trying to, because I have some questions, but I'm doing my best not to get too political. I don't even know.
Well, I wasn't going to go political, but I was just.
Which you could. I'm just trying to figure. I just didn't want to. As a pastor, I try to stay very neutral and not expose too many of my beliefs. But so much of what you're saying is almost making me pop out on them, as Kendrick Lamar would say. And I want to be careful with. I want to be careful with doing that, but. And then should you even separate what's political and what is mental health? Because in some ways I think they go hand in hand. But I do have a question for the both of you, which will probably take us right back into that, because you mentioned it earlier, and I want to talk about consequences in the Black community as a whole. In the last, let's say 5 or 6 generations, what are the major consequences that you guys have seen impact the Black community as a result of undiagnosed or mistreated, mismanaged mental health?
Oh my God, that's a loaded question, but it's a great question.
Well, it's been criminalized.
Well, yeah, it definitely, it's been criminalized, but
Whoa, that's deep. You got to expound there. That's really good.
All right, so when I talk about criminalized,
it's so good. That's so good.
Many, today I'm on the board of directors for the Mental Health Association, and we've been a pilot program in the state of New Jersey, which partners law enforcement with the mental health community. And so through the pilot program, 2 of our clinicians are available Sunday through Saturday. And when there is a crisis call, the police just don't show up.
Yeah.
They show up with a clinician on board for de-escalation.
Prior
to all of that,
yeah,
law enforcement looked at people and actually they didn't know, because think about it, a cop officer coming out of the academy, he's new to this. He see a guy talking to himself, a little violent at times, not hitting anyone, but punching the walls, and they look at that as aggression, and what happens in the officer is fear. And so they look at that person. They don't tase him, they shoot him. They look at Eric Garner selling Lucy cigarettes. They choke him out, kill him. We could talk about so many cases where mental health issues have, and Eric Gardner wasn't mental health, but I'm just saying that people of color who have been criminalized as a result of fear of officers, fear of law enforcement. And it's not us fearing them, they're fearing us in our community. So their first resort is weaponization. And what they have is the blue wall of silence. I have friends who were state troopers in the state of New Jersey. And though they were racially discriminated amongst their peers, when it came to that blue wall of silence, they were silent when it came to the injustices occurring to their own people, until they band together and had enough. And then they sued the state of New Jersey and won. This goes back 25 years in the state of New Jersey. If you Google it, you'll see where the New Jersey State Troopers, Black, is around 14 of them who sued the state police and won in their case. But it didn't solve the problem. It didn't stop it. But the criminalization in the mental health community has been so prevalent that now we're the pilot program Mental Health Association in New Jersey, but whether it's NAMI or MHA around the country, these things are happening. Why? Because they're seeing so many cases where people with a mental health disorder, or people not even with a diagnosis, people who are in crisis.
Yeah.
And because the one responding to the crisis is in a blue badge, don't understand the community.
So good. Wow. Yeah.
And then they criminalize. And what ends up happening? We end up burying our loved ones. He was just going to get Skittles. He was just going to. So the mental health issue is the law enforcement guy, because he's the one that ain't understanding what's happening in front of him. And out of fear, he responds with deadly force. I mean, man, we look.
So what does this look like for us? I was watching the news yesterday, and I can't think of the name of the law, but there has been a law in place where for those officers, if they have that type of infraction, they cannot get a job in any police force. Over the last couple of days, our president, listeners, and you fact check this. But over the last couple of days, our president has gotten rid of, or they were made to delete that what do I want to call it, a database. Mm-hmm. So what happens now is that if police officers have gotten in trouble in that way, where they were found guilty, even, they can now go work anywhere without being stopped. Am I making sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that look like for us?
A whole problem. That's a crisis. It's like reigniting a fire that, you know, it's a chemical fire. You can't just put that out any kind of way. It's scaling back and getting back to something that really is a detriment to our communities. Mm-hmm. You know, we're trying to go forward as a people, as a community, we're trying to go forward. But unfortunately, you know, administration would have us roll back. And so anything that we have done that has forwarded the movement, if you will, is a problem. It's something where every person who, you know, calls themselves an advocate, now is the time to exercise your authority. But there's an advocate in all of us. Mm-hmm. You know, it's for the person with the cell phone standing on a corner observing something that is wrong. It is a group of police officers that look like us that rally together and say, you know, we may not change the trajectory of the movement today, but if we rally together today, then maybe 10 years from now, it will be different for our children and our grandchildren. And so we can't have this mentality of what's the point? Why would we do it? You know, why advocate? They're going to do what they're going to do. We have no power, or we don't have a voice, or my voice isn't being heard. It's so irrelevant, because what's happening right now, the three of us, is impacting, I don't know how many people you have that are tuned in, but they're going to take something from this, and it's going to be an aha moment for them. And they're going to share that somewhere else. We have to put out fires that deserve to be put out, extinguished, and keep them out. We can't give them,
I hear you,
the room to reestablish, you know, to reconvene. We can't allow that to happen. Listen, this trauma is real. It's systemic, it's contagious, it's cancerous, it's across the board. It is the underbelly of everything that we are and what we stand for. It's in every genre. It's in every culture. It's in every profession. You can't have anything. And yes, mental health is in the White House, or the lack thereof.
I thought you said it's mental wealth. That means he got a lot of wealth.
Accurate on what I say. Because you have to have some level of self-awareness to have mental wealth. And I think so it's everywhere.
I think I've definitely gotten more than I expected. I think what's cool about this conversation is by tomorrow, it will have reached so many people. And I think there's such so many nuggets, and just such you're using the word wealth, but there's such wealth of knowledge in this conversation. It's excellent. I kind of don't even want to end the conversation, because I like I like this dynamic between the two of you. There's it makes for very good conversation. What are you expecting, or what is your desire? And I believe in some ways you've said it when you went into your Angela Davis speech about an advocate being in all of us. But what do you want the people to take away from tomorrow's event?
I want them to be empowered. I don't want anyone not a single person to leave feeling like they don't have any power over their own well-being, or being able to advocate for someone else who can't do it for themselves. I want us to have an arsenal of knowledge. I don't want them to walk away the same way they came. I want them to have more information. I want them to be hopeful, and I want them to be inspired. I want stigma to be a thing of the past. And I might not see that in my day, but perhaps, the younger generations coming up can kind of take the reins and run with it. It's our time to teach. It's our time to expose the deficits. It's also our time to celebrate, though. In the room on tomorrow, we'll talk about some things that really have changed for the better. Right here in Las Vegas, when you speak about, the men in blue going out, they're actually working with mental health advocates and clinicians on how to integrate that. Like, how does a mentalist get to ride along on a call where someone is obviously not in their right mind? So the conversation is on the table. And I think that it's impactful because it's not just us, Black and brown people, that there are other people who want to see change too. I think that's an important point to make, that this is a world thing. This is a people thing. This is humankind. And so I'm hoping that people leave tomorrow just simply feeling empowered, that they can go out into the community and make a difference, no matter how small or how great. We all in this fight together.
And that's a perfect way to end this. However, you guys got 10 more minutes in you, or are you conversed out?
Oh no, we got another hour. I got another hour in me. I'm tired, so I could talk when I'm tired.
I want to go back just to what you said about the church earlier in the conversation. And I don't think people realize with what I'm about to say how much addiction has to do with mental illness. There's a gospel artist right now, and she's struggling with alcohol really bad. So the issue is churches will not stop hiring her because she's one of the best singers in the world, if the truth be told. Phenomenal, a phenomenally gifted girl, but she keeps getting arrested for public intoxication.
UWI.
And it's all over the news, so everybody knows. This is the third time that it's happened, I believe. But the church won't stop hiring her because we love her gift. And I'm asking you guys to partake in this portion of the conversation and what this looks like and maybe how we should move. But there's a mental illness there. And when I saw this young lady come onto the scene, you could tell that there's some trauma.
Sure.
There's a reason why she's struggling the way she's struggling.
Yeah.
With what you said, Michael, because I have all of these thoughts and ideas about things, but I find myself at the end of it saying, but how and what? And so if the church is to really help a situation like this is definitely addiction. It's mental illness, but we're dealing with somebody that we deem as anointed and called and extremely gifted. How should the church be managing these things?
I think there's levels. I appreciate it, and I think we can relate to the person. But I push back on these things, man, when I see it, because me being in media, I get exposed to a lot of people who are celebrated, right? And so you get this one artist who is seen and is an addiction that she has, right? But she may have been drinking with pastor. She may have, hey. She may have been drinking with First Lady or other artists. And when all of their gifts, because gifts come without repentance, many are called, chosen, we could go down that road. But when you have that support system and pastors are hiring, we have to wonder about the pastors. We have to wonder about the church. We have to wonder about the leadership and what has happened that we continue to disable our wounded. And we continue to put our wounded in the forefront because of a gift that's going to bring money in our pocket. So maybe at that church, pastor just looking at the money that's coming with the name. So pastor got his own demons he's dealing with. And when the devil is present, it comes in many forms. And she may have the drinking, this one may have the gambling, this one may have the ego, this may have that. They all feed on each other. And so for her to constantly be put up, better her than us. Because we have in the Black church, we have so many issues that we don't address. And all of them are not mental illness. Most of them are behavior health issues.
That's right.
And when our behaviors have not changed, when we have failed to address these poor behaviors, I would say maybe down the road they become mental health when we get fixated in some of this stuff and never find ways of elevating ourselves from it. But I think the church in and of itself, internally, we're perpetuating two different narratives, one to the public and one within. And that's the challenge, I think, with the church, because the church of old, if we go back, we start learning that this one who was our activist leader, oh, he used to smoke, get high, this, someone else did this, but it's a different climate, different day. And so now that we have social media, we have all these platforms, everyone's weakness is exposed. That's right. Yeah. And whoever controls the narrative controls the story.
I think what's scary about what you're saying, man, because you said it's better her than me. So it almost sounds like you're saying that the church is using her. I don't know if I want to use the word scapegoat.
I'm not going to just identify and say the church is using her. What I will say is that I have many friends who are pastors who curse like sailors. I have many friends, I can't even call them friends, many people I know who are in leadership, who are whoremongers. Many people I know in leadership who are liars. Many people I know in leadership who are egotistical and are driven for self-greed. And so when you have those things, and you say, well, the lowest hanging fruit is the person that the white man done locked up and put on Front Street, we could say, oh, look at her, we need to pray for her. But yet and still, we're going to hire her because guess what? She's going to pack out this whole church. Because we're dealing with our own idiosyncrasies. My brother always said, we all suffer from our own idiosyncrasies. It's so true. We all have them until someone sees them. Then we want to ridicule. But we all have something. We all have something. So I'm not going to just relegate and say that the church is thrown out there. What I'm going to say is that the hypocritical nature of leadership within the church allows certain things to occur because they indulge in it as well. If you ever want to see what your flock is doing, go look at the head.
Jesus.
You brought me on the wrong show.
I'm going through. I'm
Pentecostal, born and raised, man.
I'm looking for some Shirley Caesar to do an altar call.
Let the church say,
or some Marvin Winans, absolutely. Good grief. Well, you know what? Oh gosh. So I'm gonna let you know now. I'm about to make all of that, maybe about 3 edits, and I'm gonna just use that because what you just said And possibly this does stray away from mental health in a way.
Oh, it's all mental health.
It's all mental health. But what you've just said, I think our people and the church needs to hear it. We need to hear that, because you're absolutely right. There's nothing to say there at all, but ouch, for all of us. Because I think at the core of who we are, when we think about the stuff that's in our closets, our secrets, stuff that we struggle with, I think most of us would say it's better her than me.
Yep.
And as you've said, and I think that is the wrong, I don't know, brother, that's heavy.
It's hurtful. It's damaging.
It's hurtful. Yeah.
Because if we are in the business of, winning souls, and then we see someone who is so fractured and debilitated, spiritually, and we allow that to exist for the sake of their gifts, that is, it's like holding a loaded gun to a person and firing it as if to shatter glass. We cannot, as leaders, see someone who is that fragile, and then we send them out in the world, but they come to the house. The sick come to the house to get well, and yet we further cause detriment to them.
And let me add to that and support that and go a little further. Think about all the pastors over the past 15 years who committed suicide.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we say, it is true, and I didn't understand it until later, that therapists need therapists.
That's right.
Pastors, you guys have this burden on you that you carry, because what you're doing, you're volunteering your bodies, your minds, your souls, and you got all of the pressures of all of these people coming at you every which way. And it's your job, in their eyes, to solve their problem. But we wrestle not with flesh and blood. What you're taking on is nothing but spirits all around you.
That's right. Yeah.
Where do you go?
Yeah.
Is the question. And so when we see this woman with the issue, think about the leadership that she comes from under. She's probably partied with that leadership just as well.
Gosh, man.
And then the irony of that is you can't be available to someone where you are not available. So if you're sick yourself,
come on,
where you're sick, you might not be broadcasting that you're struggling.
Come on.
But you're sick, and just like iron sharpens iron. Well, the sick, I mean, you receive someone that is sick, y'all just gonna be sick together. So really, it's not surprising to me, because I can't help you. I'm not available to help you, so I might as well make some money.
Oh my God, Keita. Jeez Louise.
Censor that.
She's out here with you.
Censor that.
God had to deliver me from some things before I started pastoring, or else.
Yeah.
I would have easily been, when I was listening to Sir Michael talk, I thought about Zachary Timms was his name. And you said, you described the plight of the pastor, and then you said, where do they go? And unfortunately, we, like everybody else, if not healthy, go to the bottle, go to the 8-ball, go to the prostitute. If we're not if we're not pastoring in a healthy way, when you say, where do you go? That's where we go to cope.
And also look at how it shows up on us. Within the Black community, in the Black church, you have more obesity in that church, unhealthiness in that church than any other place you'll ever find it.
I'm sorry, church, but Michael came to sit you down today.
You better end this.
He came to expose y'all today, so y'all got to tighten up. Let's end this. We still have to do a version of this tomorrow. This was a blessing. This was a beautiful, beautiful conversation. Keita, I'm going to let you just give some details about tomorrow, time, and all of that stuff.
Okay.
And then we'll wrap this up.
All right.
Before she does that,
yeah,
can we just say Beyond the Silence is now streaming on Amazon Prime Video and Tubi. Now, there you go.
Okay. And so fortunate for us, we actually have the film tomorrow. It is a free community event. We're going to be hosting it out of ACS Community Services. I want to send a shout out to my ACS family. It is from 11. The doors open promptly at 11 o'clock. It is a all-day affair. It's ending around 4:30. The film itself will start promptly at 12. But listen, I'm not trying to let you in unless you get there at 11 o'clock, because we do have some resources for the community. It's going to be an amazing affair. A panel discussion. We have William Michael Barbee, of course, on the panel. We also have Antone Dotson-Parson on the panel, and we actually have our very own Dr. Lawrence Weekly will be joining us as well. And we have an amazing book signing. And that book is called, let me see the title, I don't want to jack it up. Hear My Voice, Born Black in America, by yours truly. He will be signing copies. So do come out, support the advocacy in our community. And hopefully in our community, it will trickle out into some other communities and worldwide. This thing is on the move. This won't be the last time you see something like this. God is up to something. So I'm going to be hosting some other events throughout the community and in some other states as well. So if you're tuning in and you're not in Las Vegas, I might be coming to a city near you as well. So yeah, come on out and support the cause. It'll be amazing.
Any last words, Dr. Michael?
My mantra is leave more than you take. It's about giving of yourself to something greater. And that's what I bid you farewell.
God bless you all. Thank you guys for tuning in. And those of you that will catch the replay, God bless you as well. We'll see you at the event tomorrow. Remember to try God. He is evidence-based. And we'll see you soon.
Take care, Bishop.
Thank you.
Bishop. This was good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.